Hello, my name is MILETSKY. I am the author of Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll, and The Bear and the Fern, and a bunch of others. And I wanted to share a little bit about myself on this video. So first of all, just to give a bit of my background, I haven't always been a children's book author. I spent the first part of my career in advertising. I had a small agency out in New Jersey where we did mostly focus on larger brands such as Hershey's and Washington Mutual and a bunch of others like that. And with the advertising and marketing knowledge that I was able to accumulate through my experience, I wrote 11 or 12 traditionally published books by Pearson Education and Cengage Learning, all on topics including marketing, advertising, brand building, even some graphic design books. There were two college textbooks on digital marketing and social media marketing. So I've written quite a bit in my past, not always for children. At some point, I did get a little bit burned out of writing these 300-page tomes of marketing content. It becomes a little bit of a grind and not as much fun as I probably had thought it would be when I first went into it. Then later on in life, as I got out of advertising, I got into digital media, and I had my daughter, Bria Page, who is 7 years old now, and Bria and I, we read a book every night before she goes to sleep. And as I've been reading more books from different authors, I've started to recognize that there are some that I like quite a bit, some that I don't like at all, some that I'm very surprised ever was able to even come to the table at a traditional publisher, and started to think that, you know what, I could probably do this myself. So I gave it a shot. And more specifically, I was interested in seeing some of the books that were out there on for or about kids with disabilities. My daughter has cerebral palsy. And although she's the sweetest and happiest kid in the world, she can't walk or talk yet, but she tries very hard and she makes a lot of progress towards both of those goals. And I found that most of the books that existed out there for kids with cerebral palsy or autism or Down syndrome or whatever else tend to be very depressing. They're very isolating, very narrow in focus. And I understood why that would be. I understood that most of these books weren't written for commercial purposes, but they were probably written more as a way for a parent who was struggling emotionally to have some sort of an outlet. And so they took a topic that was very important to them, and they wrote it into a book. And I was finding books out there like one of them was Presley, the Princess of Palsy, which I cringe just to look at it. And it was Princess Panda's Tea Party, a cerebral palsy fairy tale. And most of these books were very, like I said, they're very depressing. They seem to say that these kids could have these great, a great life as long as they were just thinking about it. And I like to think that my daughter can have a great life, outside of just the fantasy world. So I've always taken a very positive, happy, hopeful approach to my daughter, and I thought that I wanted to take a very positive, happy, and hopeful approach to my writing as well. So I ended up writing my first book, Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll, is about my daughter, but in a very metaphoric way. It never mentions the word cerebral palsy. It never mentions any sort of challenge at all. It never shows a gait trainer or any kind of equipment. Most people who read it think it's a book about friendship and perseverance, and that's by design. I don't want people to think anything other than that. So a few people, parents like myself, will recognize that Ricky is a kid who can't walk, and I think all the other rocks who help Ricky are the doctors and nurses and therapists and teachers and parents and friends who are helping that child towards their goals. But I didn't want to lead with that. I didn't want to be hitting anyone over the head with a frying pan in this, and I didn't want it to be too apparent. Because I want it to be a fun book. The first thing that you need to do when you're writing a book is you need to make it fun. In terms of the best tips or advice I can give to an aspiring writer, besides the fact that you need to really look at it as a business and make sure that you know your numbers, how much it's going to cost, be prepared for a lot of negativity and a lot of rejection, understand all of that. Make sure that you're writing a book that you want, that you're not only the book that you want to write, but make sure that you're writing the book that your audience wants to read. I would say that my biggest tip would be to think about this not just from the perspective of what's important to you, but what is important for the audience in general. If you want to have sales, you need to hit a lot of people and what they're going to be interested in. The more narrow your focus is, the less likely it is going to be that your book is going to be a financial or commercial success. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you do both, and make sure that the book is fun. It's great to have a message, it's great to have a moral, it's great to have a lesson, but you just don't lead with that. Put that on the back burner, have that as an, oh, by the way, and there's a great message. But the first thing is that this book has to be fun to read. This has to be something that the kid's going to want to reach for over and over again because they have so much fun reading it. Make sure it's character driven, make sure it's plot driven. Let the characters kind of lead the way, so that kids get to know who the characters are and they enjoy the characters and they feel like they're friends with the characters. Make sure there's a plot, make sure that the plot is interesting. And that there is actually a story with a problem and a resolution. And oh, by the way, here's a great lesson. That's kind of done in more of a subtle way and not just we're going to be very, very obvious about this sort of a way. So I would say that's probably my biggest tip. In terms of some of my books, so I started off with Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll, and from there I've also developed. I also wrote The Bear and the Fern, which is a bit of a different story. That one is not. That one is a little more of a serious sort of a book. It's more heartwarming. I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying that they cried at the end. Happy tears, obviously, but that's more of an emotional tug with that book. And I'm actually really proud of that one. I've also written a more of a silly book called Beware of the Nose-Biting Monster, which I think I actually have that one here. And that one is this book right here. It might be backwards here, but that one's more of a silly book about a child who goes through their teething period as an infant. And then I have a bunch of books that are coming out. A second and third book for my rock characters is Tess, the Tin That Wanted to Rock, followed by Three Grumpy Rocks, and then Rock and Rhyme, which is a poetry book based on those characters. I also have a book called The Masterpiece, which is a book about paintbrushes that come together to put together a masterpiece, and how they deal with the fact that some of the brushes might act and behave a little bit differently. It's actually technically a book that helps to raise awareness of autism, again, without actually mentioning the word autism or the word spectrum or anything like that in the copy, but just letting it be more of a subtle kind of a nod. And that'll be followed by a second book called The Molding of Clay, which also revisits the art room with these same brushes, and a new character, a big blob of clay that comes to visit. And then a little bit further down the road, I have a book called Patrick Picklebottom and the Longest Wait, Patrick Picklebottom and the Penny Book, and then finally a book that is almost in the illustration stages called Tyrannosaurus Hex. So by this time next year, I should have potentially 7 or 8 books out there, which I'm excited about. So that's kind of about it. I know that in terms of a recommendation for other books, I think any of Diane Alber's books would be good ones to read. I think that Brandon Walden's book, Seeds and Trees, would be good. I think that there are a lot of great books out there. I think that I can think of any number of books. Meet G and the Locust Tree by Clay Anderson is a really good one that I would look at seriously. I do think that indie authors are doing a lot these days to do some really high quality books that can compete in a very real way with traditionally published books. And although I still read traditionally published books, I'm often amazed and really impressed by what some of the indie authors are doing out there. And I'm glad to see more indie authors are taking the time to do some research into the industry, learning to stay away from the vanity presses, learning the right ways to go about self-publishing, putting together really good, high-quality stories. So I would just say, as much as you can as a reader, support independent authors because they do work really hard. And if you are a writer, do your research first, understand the industry that you're getting into. Don't rush into something before you really understand it. And make sure that you're writing a book that really can reach a lot of people, and be something that people are going to want to read. So that's it. So thanks very much for watching this. I hope you enjoy the story that Luci is going to read for you, and that's it. So I guess I will talk talk with you all soon.